Hello.
Hey,
I like that we're both wearing red.
I
I,
know, I
I
like
just
that
I
too.
just changed into this a couple minutes ago, and I'm glad that we're matching somewhat anyway.
I love that. How are you doing, Aries King?
I'm I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right. Just I kind of woke up from a nap a little bit. I just was kind of taking a mental break from the writing that I was doing, and now I'm awake. I'm doing well. How are you? Your birthday just passed. How'd you celebrate?
Well, my friends and I, they're amazing. They set up a little Zoom thing for us to do together,
Nice.
just so we could have like a game night virtually. So that was so much fun, and I really missed them. And then my family, we ended up spending a good portion of the day together, just hanging out,
Mm,
doing some stuff outside, and then we had dinner and watched a movie. So it was really nice. It was really, really nice. I'm
that's
sad though that we can't all connect, like, not everyone can connect in real life, but it'll make it so much sweeter when we can, right?
yeah. I've spoken to because my birthday happened like right at the beginning of quarantine. Like we were maybe a week or two into it, and it's just it's hard to celebrate. It I mean it's hard to celebrate in just that there's so many pieces that you have to kind of work around in general when it comes to having a party, like getting the people, getting the venue, finding something that everyone wants to do. But I think especially with the virtual hangouts and everyone's schedules being what they are, it's difficult. So I'm definitely with you that when this is all over, I'm gonna have a proper celebration with people and like get big hugs. I miss hugs so much.
I know. I agree.
So much.
Touch starved. It's hard.
Mm-hmm.
But I think we'll get
Absolutely.
started then. So
Okay.
thank you so much, Mars, for being my guest. Hey, where's Michelle? Let me just make sure. Thank you so much for being the next guest on my IG Live series. I really wanted to have you, especially from the beginning. And then I think with everything going on, I wasn't sure if it would be something that you'd be interested in. So I'm so grateful to have you here today.
No
You
problem.
and I feel like we kind of were part of this UFT talent come up. Like I feel like we were doing the same circuit.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we've been friends for I think 5 years now,
Yep.
5 or 4,
About 4 or 5 years.
and it like I'm almost more surprised when I go to like UFT or UTSC events and you're not there because I'm so used to seeing you at those events, and I'm very thankful because I think it's very easy to kind of see someone and then like never see them again, or to see someone and not get their Instagram handle or any of their social media, and then that person just kind of like gone to you forever. But I see you all the time. Like in those 5 years, I've definitely seen you more than I've seen like people who I like grew up with and went to high school with. So it's nice that we do get to have these somewhat regular check-ins to see how each other are doing like as people, but then also to kind of discuss what we're doing artistically. So I'm very thankful for the relationship that we've had over these couple of years, and I'm sure that we're going to continue having it, like regardless of whether or not we're doing perform. Because I mean, we haven't done performances in months now, and we still have this beautiful connection.
Yes, I know. I absolutely agree. And I'm very grateful for it too, because it's like you said, with the entertainment business, you can meet someone today, you can never see them again the next day. And we've been able to, every single time we are able to connect and be present on the same stages, I always think it's a blessing. The
Mm-hmm.
only thing I can't not believe, and I blame myself for it, and so I'll apologize. But the fact that we do not have a picture together, I'm like, we
Oh,
see
we
each
don't.
other all the
We
time.
don't. Oh wow, yeah, we
So
don't.
next stage, we got to fix that.
Okay, maybe and hopefully we can get like this red on red thing going matching because I feel like our styles are somewhat similar, but I feel like we're never dressed similarly when we're with each other. So maybe we'll have to coordinate that.
Yes. Okay, you let me know. Hey, I'm always down.
I'm always game. I'm always game.
Well, I guess we'll start because what will happen is like, thank you to everyone who came in and is watching right now. If you missed it for whatever reason, you'll be able to watch it after on YouTube and IGTV. So for the folks here now and for the folks who will watch it later, tell them about Mars the Poet.
Okay, so Mars the Poet is my stage name. I didn't come up with that until years later, but also I'll take you back to the very beginning. Like I think most people, I started really getting into poetry because of an English class. Like we had a poetry unit. One assignment that we had is we had to look up a poet and do a biography on them, do like an analysis of their poems. And I chose a poet named Derek Walcott, who's from Trinidad, where my grandparents are from. So it was really interesting getting into the story, his style. Like he liked to talk about mythology and stories, and I found it really interesting that you could do that, and you didn't have to kind of write about like I love you, the roses are red, violets are blue kind of thing. So that's what really propelled me to take more interest in it. And then I later did a project in that same poetry unit with a Toronto poet by the name of Dwayne Morgan. And Dwayne Morgan is actually someone who both of my parents know. So my mom actually gave me a physical copy of Dwayne Morgan's first book. I read through it. I did a biography on him. And again, that really kind of opened my mind up to the what poetry could be. Like he had a poem about a nasty old lady. He had poems that spoke about race, which was something that I had never seen before in poems. And from then, I just kind of started writing more regularly. Like having a notebook with me was something that I did more often. Um, and then getting into high school is when I really started exploring it more. Started to get into more abstract concepts, like writing about things. I started writing about things that weren't just like confessionals and pouring out my heart and being like, I'm so sad because X and Y doesn't love me. There definitely was some of that when I did start, but really just kind of using poetry as a way to work through things. I consider myself somewhat of a private person, and when I'm able to write about a subject, I'm able to kind of look at it from every different angle and kind of think of the best way to deal with it. And by deal with it, I mean explain it and get to the end of the poem. So that's those are my roots in poetry. And then the name Mars the Poet came from when I was at UTSC. We had a radio show, The Borough Sound, and I was on there with the two co-hosts, Jun and Czar, who goes by Big Turk now. But we all needed to kind of come up with names, and because I didn't want to go by Marcus Medford on the air, so I was trying to think. I'm like, well, I'm a poet. Mars is I'm born in March. Mars is March in French. God, like the god of war. And I'm like, that all seems it fit to me. And then also the Mars part came because like I feel like I'm a regular person, but a little strange. I'm like a Martian. Like you know how Earth and Mars are very similar, but a little bit different. That's how that's how I feel as a person and as an artist. So that's how Mars the Poet came to be.
Wow, no, that's amazing. And I love that you had those kind of like growth and changes through high school as well. I can definitely relate to that.
Mm-hmm.
Because even when I started doing music, I don't feel like I started like you're saying, like always doing something that was super personal to me and super like
Mm-hmm.
confessional as well. There was a lot of like trying different themes and like talking about different things.
Mm-hmm.
And I grew into being able to be more confessional. I feel like some people that's their first thing that wasn't like that for me either. So I think that's really cool. And first of all, I also think that you have a really nice name, regardless.
Oh, thanks.
Like outside of your stage name, I think you have a very nice name. So that's really interesting. Did you find then that as you kind of were developing, where your poetry was going into like university and stuff, did you feel that had an impact on it as well?
Yeah, definitely. I think as I got older, like as you said, like beginning to explore more themes, but also for me that meant exploring like different structures. I'm a very big fan of like what would I think be consoled or called traditional poetry. So things that are more structured, like sonnets, elegies, limericks. I love limericks. So as I got older, I just started exploring those things more. And I think that is also at the time when I started. It started to become actually. I think it always has been very therapeutic. That sometimes I would write things and I would go into it knowing that like I'm not trying to come up with a poem. Like I'm just trying to write about whatever is going on. And I think as I got older, I just realized the power of talking about some of those things. Like I remember when I wrote a poem about my best friend's mom who passed away, because she was like a godmother and aunt to me, and being able to honor her memory in that way and kind of work through those feelings and have a poem that wasn't just about me, that was dealing with something that was bigger than me or more important to me, was something that I really really enjoyed, and I got a lot from it. And then when I would see that some of these more exploratory poems were relating with people, even though they have nothing to do with the situation at hand, was something that I was encouraged by, definitely.
Wow. No, that's amazing. That's amazing. And thank you for sharing that. Because, you know, it's I feel like especially when you're tapping into art, there's so many places that you can come from. And I think because we live in a world where so many people are doing so many different forms of art, some people don't always think about what goes into these personal pieces. And it takes a lot from artists, you know what I mean? Like they're not always fun, happy things to discuss, but when we put them in art, then they can help us and they can help other people. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really amazing.
There's on that note, I had one of my poems published in an anthology. Like I entered this kind of competition, and it was chosen by one of the editors as one of the pieces that it was going to be selected. This poem is Ripples. You might not know Ripples because I almost never perform Ripples, and part of the reason why is it was a really painful poem to write. Like I remember just being in a very sad and lonely place when I wrote it. And so when it was accepted into the anthology, like part of me was like, wow, that's fantastic, because this is the first time that my work is existing in something that I didn't produce and put together. Like it's not a blog or anything like that. But at the same time, it's just like every time I looked at that poem, or when I did have to perform it, I would very much get back into those emotions. Like as I'm reading these words, like I know the moments and the feelings that inspired those specifically. Um, but as you were saying, it was great to be able to take something that was such a painful experience and then create a a, a beautiful poem. Supposedly, it got in the book.
Of course.
Um, but it was great that that people were able to resonate with that, even though the things that I was talking about were deeply personal and could not apply to anyone else.
No, that's amazing. And I really think that goes to show the power of just like art and tapping into that
Absolutely,
introspectively.
absolutely.
And and people don't always it's we could have a whole conversation on that, but we got lots to go through today.
Yeah, no, we'll leave that, for another chat.
Yes, yes. We'll talk about that another time. But definitely great points that you've made so far. So if anyone who's watching already wants to check out Mars's work, you got to go get
Oh,
the book. See, not everyone has a physical copy like Z, but you can get one. Please hit him up for that. And one thing I really wanted to ask you about the book, which is amazing. Of course, you know that already, how I feel about it.
thank you.
But what was the publishing process like for doing that? Because I feel like sometimes people don't always consider the nuances of it. And there are so many ways to publish nowadays, but
Mhm,
having something like a physical book that I can hold right here and show the people,
mhm.
what goes into that process and what do people really need to know about it?
I the first thing that I think that people need to know about it is you really just need a push. Um, I what actually caused me to write the book or start putting the book together was I got let go of a job that I had had. So I had a lot of free time, but I also I knew that I was going to be working somewhere in the summer, so I had like a 2 month gap. And my mom told me, she's like, why don't you start putting your book together? Like, I know that you have all these poems. It's like, why don't you put a book together? I've wanted to write a book since I was 5. So it made sense to do that. And so the process, the first part of the process was going through all of my potential poems and seeing which ones I wanted to include. Once I had all the ones that I wanted to include, going back and cleaning them up, because some of these poems are like poems that I wrote in like 2009. So like at this point they're like 5, 6 years old. I matured as a person and as a poet, and I wanted the poems to reflect that so that they could be the best that they could be. So self editing once all of that was sorted, figuring out how I wanted to organize the chapters, the names for the chapters. Once all of that was settled, it was a matter of going to publishers. My mother has a publishing company, and she put together one of her friend and coworkers' poetry collections. So she told me about, like, you'll need to have the logos, you'll need to have the ISBN so that you're able to sell it and kind of track your sales. So that was the next part of it, getting the branded logos that were going to go on the book, and then going on to Fiverr, to find people who would edit the book, put the book together, design the cover. Designing the cover was actually a really interesting process because I had an idea of what I wanted. Like, I knew that I wanted a river, I wanted a tree, I wanted a moon, I wanted the geese, and I wanted a bench, but I didn't know how I wanted that to come together, what the style would be like. So part of the process was looking through the individual graphic designers' portfolios, essentially, to see what their style was like, going to get pictures of pictures that inspired what the title would look like or what the cover would look like, and then a bit of back and forth between them and I to figure out what I wanted. And then once the external was done, getting the internal designed so that everything was the way I wanted it to be. I did not, and what I will say to anyone who is thinking about publishing, whether it's self-publishing or taking it to a publishing house, is get an editor, because I had, and if you're going to do poetry, I would actually almost recommend getting two editors, one person to edit and give feedback based on the actual content, like how does everything sound, what does it feel like, what is the how did I interpret your poem? And then you want someone else to just worry about the grammatical parts of it, making sure that all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted, making sure the commas and things are in the same place, just so that the two people looking at it will have separate jobs. And if you don't find an external editor, I would give yourself one of those roles and dedicate the other role to someone else, so that the person who's looking at it will be looking at it from a different perspective, and they're not coming with it with the same knowledge of the project that you are. Because I think that when you know something really well, you tend to overlook things, or you tend to see things only the way you intended it to be seen, and you kind of ignore other perspectives. And having that additional perspective, I think, make make any kind of work you do more relatable and more accessible to other people. So that was the process. And then the very last part of it was, once all of the pictures were decided, the order was decided, figuring out who was going to actually print the book. And that just came down to a matter of who was going to give me the best price for the amount that I wanted to print, and how fast. Because I had actually planned the launch party for this, or for the book, and I wanted to make sure that when I was having the launch party that I actually had the books at the launch party. So that's everything that went into the decision-making process for the book.
Wow, that's amazing. And thank you for, there's a lot of good tips that you gave for anyone, including little old me, to learn from for publishing. So when my book's ready, I'm gonna be calling you up.
Oh, please do. I would be happy to do one of those two edits for you. Absolutely. Or even just to like read it. I would be glad to do that. Yeah, we're
Oh,
definitely
thank
gonna have to
you.
talk later.
Yes, yes. This is a whole. We're gonna work it out. We have to figure it out because there's so much to discuss. Before I get into my next question, I noticed a lot of comments in the feed, so I wanted to just bring those up really quick. So Annie says, "Thank you for the wonderful tips." Let me just scroll. Sorry, guys. Asemi Barut says, "My two phase. Thank you so much."
Hey.
Words with Michelle says, "Good advice." Agreed. And I saw a couple up there before. One sec. Pink Kitty Music says, I always admire artists who talk about personal experiences in their art. Agreed, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I know Lady D said something.
There's yeah, and I love it. I think one of my favorite performances that I've seen was by a young man named Diego Deliska. He was performing at Rise, and during his during his poem, he was shaking. Like he was physically shaking. He was crying, and like not full on weeping, but like you could see tears coming from his eyes. He had to take breaks, and it was really powerful because like you've felt it. It's like I can tell how much emotion went into this piece, and I got a sense of how good it must feel for him to have that release, to be able to talk about these things, and to have people accept and resonate with it. So yeah, putting emotion in your art, whatever kind of art you do, is absolutely what you should do. Your art should be reflective of you, I think, anyway.
I agree. I agree. And when people resonate with that, it is just, I mean, there's no words for how amazing that feels.
It's
Like,
validate. Like it's like people saying like I validate your experience,
hmm
which is great. Like especially if you're writing something about something that's sad. It's like I didn't just go through this sad situation for no reason.
hmm absolutely. Lady D says, wow, congrats on getting it published.
Thank you.
Um, and then I think there was a few more, but my chat is, let me see. Which is Michelle says, I'm loving the tips too, might use some of them. Um, Wavy H9. Sorry guys, the chat for some reason is going in and out on my end, but thank you so much, Marcus. I miss you. Can't wait to see you at the center soon.
Whoop, whoop, whoop.
Okay.
Whenever that will be, whenever this pandemic ends.
So the next question I wanted to bring up to you is something that you kind of mentioned earlier, but your mother, Nikimbe Obeobab, and
Mm-hmm.
even that like you have a very business oriented family. I really respect that. I just want to say that, like first and foremost, like I watched her because what you guys may not know is they were both at she was a keynote speaker and you were a performer at
Mm.
TEDx UTSC last year. Congratulations on that. That is a huge accomplishment.
It was a lot of fun. It was a
Mhm.
lot of fun.
And I watched both of yours, and loved both, and I really loved everything she was talking about. She was so
Mm-hmm.
introspective, and she brought up so much great tips and things that people need to think about if they want to push forward in their own ways and in their
Mm-hmm.
own businesses. So I really respected that. What would you say was kind of the experience, not only just going through that as a performer yourself, but knowing that your mother was also going to be presenting at TEDx UTSC? And as someone who has also performed at TEDx UTSC, I
Mm-hmm.
know there's a lot of stuff that people will never see that goes into that. So what could you tell us?
Um, first and foremost, that I was not supposed to be a part of TEDx UTSC that year. Um, there was someone who was involved in the organizing committee who I know, there are people who are involved with putting these events together or who attend these events. So it was a friend of mine, Risa, who she'd seen me perform. So when someone dropped out, I was one of the names that she came up with, and some of the other people on the executive team had heard me perform, so they asked me to go, and I, like as you said, like performing at TEDx UTC is such a huge stage. Like I think what was really attractive to me about the proposition is the whole goal of TEDx, or TED in general, is spreading ideas and having innovative conversations. And I realized that that's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to do. So I was very excited that I was going to be able to get that chance to be able to come up with a set list to tell a story to match the theme. Um, so that was a lot of fun. Knowing that I was going to be performing at the same event as my mom was really exciting to me, especially because she didn't know. She didn't know for a while. Like I don't think it wasn't
Oh,
until she was having, I think, a discussion with someone on the executive team that someone kind of mentioned, they're like, "Oh, like are you two going to be coming together," kind of thing. Or that's how she found out about it. And I think, I mean, not to say that like because I'd done a performance at TEDx UTSC before, that like it wasn't something new to me, but really what was special to me was the fact that my mom was going to be a speaker there. Um, my mom and I are very close. She tells me about like business things going on, like when she has drama with like her friends. Sometimes she'll tell me about it. So I know, and like especially from a business perspective, I've seen all the posters on the wall, and I've seen my mom talk about things and almost will them into existence, like plan them into existence. And I know that the TED Talk was something that she was very much looking forward to doing. So I was very happy that she was going to be able to do that. I went through her presentation a few days before she gave it, so I knew what she was going to talk about. And I'm like as you were saying, there's so much information and good tips in there, like that you can apply to life, to business, to your relationships, to a way to kind of look at your past. And I was just really amazed of what she came up with. And like I knew that I knew it was going to be a hit and that it would be successful with people. And after the event, well, like when I was walking through the campus, like because I went to that school, so I know a bunch of people still. So as I was talking to people, I got the amount of people who said to me, it's like, yo, Marcus, your performance was great, but yo, Nikimbe, it's like, I was my favorite part of that was, I think that that performance was one of my best performances, but my mom's performance was so so much better. And like that to me is great because I know that she brought it. I know that the reason that it resonated with people is because, as you say, like she was giving out real good advice. So it was nice for me to have, for people to be like, wow, your mom's so amazing. I'm like, yes, I know my mom's amazing. Like I've had her in my life all this time. It's like, and I think also because we were performing back to back, seeing the influence that she's had on my life, like beyond the fact that she was a person who told me like, hey, you're not working anymore, why don't you put this book together? Being able to see the influence she's had on my life was really cool. And then to kind of to sit there in the audience and kind of watch as a fan, because that's not something you get to do often with your parents and anything really. So that was really really cool for me.
Wow, no, and I could see it in both of your performances. Just they were both so excellent, and I have a very close relationship with my mother as well, so
Mm-hmm.
I totally understand, and she's been my biggest supporter from day one. So I know how that feels when you have that rider, and then you get to see it manifest in such an amazing way,
Yeah.
especially on such a huge influential stage. Like I really do think, TEDx, especially TEDxUTSC, I think is a very serious opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
I really do think they pick amazing people for it. So when I heard you got, I was not even surprised at all.
Oh,
And I was so happy to see that you and your mother got to take part in that and really got to show so much of yourselves. I think you both did a phenomenal job.
thank you. Yeah, I know it's something my mom's definitely very very proud of. Like, and I think also what we did is just telling our story. Like my mom's presentation was just her story,
Hmm.
and my set, I think, because I think the theme for this past TEDx was hindsight. And really what it was is like picking poems that dealt with specific instances, and then um, the way that I structured it was like, this is a poem about a specific instance, and before doing the poem or after doing the poem, I was reflecting on that experience, or reflecting on the feeling that gave birth to the poem. So it was nice to be able to be able to tell our stories, and then to have that resonate and inspire some people as well.
Hmm. No, I completely agree. And I have to say, I've started doing that with some of the performances I did before everything happened with quarantine and COVID. Um, I started explaining and reflecting on like why I wrote certain songs that I did.
Mm-hmm.
And for so long, I was just like, I've kind of, like I've put it in the song, people will feel it, but when I actually explained, like, oh, this next song's about this narcissist I dealt with, or this next song is about the situation I'm in, people were like, oh, I see the vision now. Like, you know what I mean? I see
Mm-hmm.
everything. I hear it in the song, but I kind of already have an idea. So they're getting more from it now. So I
Mm-hmm.
actually think that's an amazing way actually to connect more with people. And to see you do that and to like know that that was something that you felt was working for you as well. I can definitely agree that I think that's a great way that people don't always think to kind of connect with the audience as well.
Yeah, I think that because that is something that I don't do it all the time, but there are some pieces. It's like this will this will resonate with you, or you'll have a better understanding of this poem if you know what inspired it. I think it helps make the poems more relatable, because if you're it's like I've been in a situation with a narcissist. Like I've spent too much time on someone who didn't deserve it, kind of thing, and it kind of it puts the viewer audience in your shoes, and it makes the story seem less foreign. And I think that if you have that information going into a piece or a performance, that it makes it easier for the audience or the viewer to follow. Like you don't have to worry about, like, because if your story, the essence of your story is captured in like 3 bars, if you don't pick up on those 3 bars, you lose a lot of the meaning of the song. And it could still be, especially with your stuff, like your music is very bouncy and very, the energy of it is really good, and you'll still get that. But I think
Thank you.
if you miss out on that explanation, it's like you might not be able to connect it, or you might be like, oh, like that was when he was talking about that, or it's like, oh, that's what he means. So I think it just kind of, it helps create a more complete picture and complete experience, if you have that explanation. I don't think you have to explain everything, but I think if there is meaning to it, you should explain it. Like one of the poems that I did at thing was a poem that I wrote the day that my best friend died, and I always feel like that explanation is important, because it's important. It's just important. It's important for the story. I think that, and for me, I didn't realize how significant of an event it was until after. Like I think looking at it in the context of, this is a poem that I wrote the day my friend died, before I knew that he died, and then looking at the poem after, it's like, oh, I I don't know. You know, it
No,
just it
you connect in a deeper way for sure, 100%.
yeah. And I think for me, having that realization, like when I look back to the poem and realize, like, I wrote this poem the day that this person died, hours before I knew this person died. But if you were to read that poem, it felt like I knew. It's like, so I think having that explanation in there adds a different layer to it.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think the perfect way to continue on with that is to kind of go over a couple parts from some of your works.
Oh.
So if the class, if you have the book, turn the page. No, I'm just kidding. We're gonna come quote it.
Listen, get the book so you can turn to the page, and then you won't be missing out. Then I won't have to
Exactly.
explain everything you'll get.
So I will quote a couple for, because I wanted one thing. First of all, I think your work is very profound, and I also think that you speak on things that, especially a lot of your works, even though I've heard them before, they are still super duper relevant to things that happen today, things that have happened yesterday, things that are happening in the near future that we're already seeing happening. And I think you really touch on all these in a really great way. So in 2011, likes Lost in the Electricity,
Mm-hmm.
you talk kind of about relationships in that kind of digital sense and how we're moving away from physical forms of media. For example, books. So kind of where do you see that going, and what was kind of like how you were feeling behind writing that?
Um, really, what 2011 likes comes from is feeling disconnected from people. Like I felt like I would have I would have these thriving relationships and conversations with people when I would see them in person. And I was in high school and still am a very social person. Like I knew everyone, I would talk to everyone, but then I would like go home at the end of the day, and like it's just me and my thoughts. When I was going through things emotionally, like I felt like I wasn't able to reach out. I wasn't able to reach out to to these people, or like say you have hundreds of friends on Facebook, but not one of them, like, but no one would reach out to you. No one would check in on you, kind of thing. So that's what part of it was. It's like how you exist in this digital space, but there's a disconnect between who you are there and who you are outside of there, or the relationship or the connectivity that you have with people doesn't exist in the same kind of way. um, that was the main part of it, but also like to your point, of not being able to connect with the real world, like shifting away from newspapers and books, and like even some smaller things, like the fact that a majority of people do their shopping online or do their banking online. It's like we're moving into these like digital siloed experiences, and not kind of interacting with people outside of them. And it felt weird. Like it felt weird that I was going, that like, for I could post something, I could post a picture of me smiling or a picture of me doing something and get like a whole bunch of likes, but at home be miserable. And there were times that I was really miserable, and I was frustrated that I had all these people in my life, but I felt like none of them were there for me when I needed them to be, kind of thing. Or that people's attention were focused on the wrong kind of things. And I don't mean like me. I mean like when there's issues with something. Like I was never a fan of like war, or I find war just to be stupid. And it's just kind of like, I would hear stories about things happening in other places, and it's like, how, like, why is this not important to people? It's like, this is something that's happening in the real world and people are really dying, but all the conversation online is about this, that, and the third. And so it's just kind of being frustrated with that. And then I think also that being on the internet too much, like, you spend too much time focusing on yourself, and not like, it's about, look at me, look what I'm doing, and you're not looking at other people or other situations going on. So that's really what it came down to. And people
No,
just being
wow.
phony. Not to sound like Holden Caulfield, but it's just like people, being online allows you to be a person that you may not actually be in real life,
Yep.
and it was frustrating.
Hmm. No,
It's
that's
still
totally
frustrating.
fair. And there's a great line from there I do want to quote. Soon it'll be late to teach a book and a face how to cooperate. And I loved that line. Having grown up being such an avid reader, and I think university kind of destroyed that for me, to be honest. But
Yeah.
also just I access a lot of writing online more now, and I enjoy that. But it is different.
Mhm.
And but we see continuously how people are moving away. We see it even in like schools and stuff where kids are using tablets now and stuff like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like the whole
absolutely.
world is moving in that way. So I think everything you said here was like just so spot on.
Thank you. It was just a rant. Really, really, that there are some poems, but that poem was really just a rant. Like, that was not a poem. Like, I didn't sit down and be like, oh, I'm gonna write a poem. It was like, yo, I'm mad. I think that a bunch of my friends were out doing something, and like out having a party, drinking, doing whatever, and I was at home just miserable. And I'm like, how is it there are like 15 of these people who are my friends, and they're just dashing me to the side? So yeah, I mean, I've forgiven them. We're all good now. But at the time, it was not fun.
But hey, you got poetry out of it. That's what I always say. If I go through some BS, if I get a song out of it, I'll take it.
That is very true. That is very, very, that's really, really true, actually.
The next poem I wanted to talk about, and I feel like if I'm wrong, please correct me. But I feel either have not seen you perform this in a while, or I personally feel like I haven't seen you perform it. But Pressure, I
Oh,
really really enjoyed Pressure, and I true like I relate to so much of your work, if not all of it. I 100% do, but that one really was like it kind of almost took me a little bit aback how much I was kind of like, oh wait, like I totally understand what he's talking about
hmm,
here. And for those who haven't seen you perform it yet or haven't read it before, you touch on a number of things, including masculinity. I'm just going to listen so I don't forget any. Male and female relationships
hmm.
and misogyny as well. So I really would love to know the story behind that because that one, especially, I feel like that after I heard that one, especially at your TEDx UTSC performance,
Mm,
that to me is in my top five Mars the Poet
wow,
post. Yeah, I
wow,
actually really respect what you said there, and I really really enjoyed it.
wow. I really, really appreciate that. I'm not very surprised that you. That's not a poem that I perform often. I like to perform that one. I like to, in general, kind of like if there's an event and I know there's a theme to that event. It's like we're talking about family. We're talking about loneliness. We're talking about hindsight. I try to kind of match poems that I have to to that. So there's not a lot of events or opportunities to do pressure that feel appropriate. But what pressure came from was that was a poem I think I wrote towards the end of high school, so maybe grade 11 or grade excuse me, grade 11 or grade 12, and being a boy in being just a person in high school, I think really is there's a lot of focus on like on sex, on girls, on like hooking up at parties and whatnot. I still very well remember to the day where one of my friends in our like guy friend group came to our came to the table came to the cafeteria table to say that they had just had sex for the last night, and it was or last night, and it was like just a huge announcement. Everyone was very like, whoa, congratulations, you did it, this, that, and the third. um so I think how it came about is just looking at my relationships and my conversations I had with my guy friends opposed to my female friends. Like no the way that people would talk, like the way that we would talk about girls, and I say we because I was definitely a part of it. I don't want it to seem like I wasn't a part of these conversations, that I didn't say things that were unflattering or not problematic, because they are. I think that I did realize that at the time. Like I realized that we're having these conversations about girls, and it's like not even about them as people really. The line about your sister, like it feels so good to have and dismiss her until the slut is your little sister. That to me was inspired by kind of real conversations that we had, because in my friend group almost all of us had sisters, and most of our sisters were younger, and like that would be a thing. It's like yo man, like if I see your sister at a party, I'm gonna not not do anything violent, but like I'm gonna try and get with your sister, because like that would be something that would piss you off, especially because it's like that the guy saying that didn't have good intentions in mind. So it's like I wouldn't like the thought of you screwing. Like I have a younger sister, and it's like there are very few of my friends who it's like if my sister was to date them, I would be okay with them. And that's not so much a condemnation on my friends. It's more so just like you just get protective. And I think what I wanted to say is like you wouldn't think that this is an appropriate way for your sister to be treated or for someone to talk to your sister, but this is what we're doing. This is what we're taking part of. And on the other side of that, I would have conversations with girls who would get really upset because they had bad experiences with guys. Like there were a couple instances of like pictures being spread, and not to say that it ruined these people, but it was really really impactful on these people. Like it
Mhm.
really messed them up emotionally. And it was just kind of looking at it like that. It's like this is so weird. It's like why is the end goal of all of this to like hook up with someone or sleep with someone? Like what is that all about?
Mhm.
So it was really just kind of unpacking that. And pressure and imperfection, I call them sister poems. And the reason I call them sister poems is imperfection is really looking at it from the female perspective, which obviously I don't have, but from the conversations that I would have with my female friends of like getting down on themselves for not looking a certain way or for not hooking up with people, or that they would hook up with people and then just be like dismissed by them. And then pressure was looking at it from the guy's perspective of being the dismissive person, having these conversations. of the focus that was put on relationships when, like, you know, these people don't genuinely care about each other. So it was just kind of trying to talk about that. And again, I do want to say that, like, pressure, I'm in by no means excluded from pressure, the conversations that happen, like, but it was really just realizing, I'm like, this feels weird. And I think that there were times, like, in these settings where I would try to play a role, or I would try to relate to the situation and be like, oh yeah, like, I totally think she's a two, or this, that, and the third. And it felt weird. Like, it felt weird trying to fit into these spaces, because these spaces feel weird. It's like it just felt unnatural and unhelpful. And I could see, and the reason why Pressure and Imperfection are sister poems is I can see how the thoughts and actions of one are influencing the other, and it's like it becomes very cyclical. It's like we're just in these repetitive phases of treating each other badly for sex, essentially.
I mean, I think that's it all right there.
Oh yeah, man. And it was weird for me as well, because, like, that poem didn't become important or impactful to me until later. Like, I think until really getting the, like, I'm a nerd, so, like, getting the theory behind it, like, like learning about things like rape culture, it's like, oh my god, that's pressure. It's like learning about, like, misogyny and, like, what some branches or thoughts of feminism is. It's like, oh, like, I get that. So it was something that became more important to me after. Like, when I was writing it, I was just writing because I'm like, this is what's going on. And also, I felt like I could not have, like, I didn't have any conversations like Pressure with people, not until much later. It's like, because even the points about how it would seem weak or silly
Mm-hmm.
to talk about your feelings, it's like I could not have these conversations about my feelings. I could only have that in writing. And, like, people didn't see Pressure until much after, like, way later.
Wow. No, that's amazing. I think, yeah, that's definitely up there with one of my faves. I think you've elucidated that very well. And I think in the future I would love to even have like a further breakdown of like everything that is in that poem, because I think a lot of people need to hear that one. I really think so. And
Oh wow.
that's definitely up there, yeah, for me. For the next question, I'm gonna ask it to you now, but I've been checking my time and I want to make sure that we don't get cut off. If we do, I'll just open up a new live
Okay.
and situated in, but I definitely don't want this question and your response to this, or any of the questions, but especially this one, to be cut off or like have any issues. So what I'll do is, if it does end up getting cut off when I edit it later for YouTube and everything, I'll put it back together.
Okay.
It will seem less.
No problem.
So for the next question, I didn't want to ask you, and one thing I have seen you perform many a times,
Mm-hmm.
is poetry related to your blackness, and
Mm-hmm.
not just how you feel about your blackness, but how the world views that as well, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is really profound. And I think I see a lot of artists who've done that in the past, a lot of artists who are working on their crafts now, doing that more, speaking on that. You know what I mean? Not only
Mm-hmm.
how it affects them, but how it kind of resonates within the world sphere. Given the times that we are in now, how important do you feel it is to utilize these art forms to speak on racism, especially when it comes to Black people?
I think that I think first and foremost, I think that well, the two that I think about, Black Reflection and Breaking News. Black Reflection was very much for me, like, with some, as same thing with some of my other poems. Is like, this is something that's going on with me. What is going on? How do I feel about what's going on? What's going on? How do I, like, what are my thoughts about it? Um, and it was, again, like, it was therapeutic, I think, to look at, and I think with Black Reflection, to look at some, like, almost, no, not even every single instance or example of something is something that happened. Like, people, people being surprised that I like Bach, people being surprised that I don't play basketball, that I don't speak with slang, that, like, it was really just kind of allowing myself to be frustrated, because I felt like I wasn't before that. So I think that it's a great way to vent, to rant, to get some of these things off your chest. And I think that especially with that poem, like being a black man, it's like I know that there are other black people who are going to relate to this. I know that not every single situation is something that all black people will have gone through, but it's like I know that you will relate to this. So I was glad that people did relate to it, that it did resonate for them, especially for other black people, that they could see themselves in them. I know that that was something that I kind of struggled with. Like I I'm not like some of these other people, but like, do I not belong in this group? Should I be trying to get in this group kind of thing? So um, to be able to have people see that and be like, yes, I felt how you felt when I felt that no one felt like that was reassuring. But I think what I liked about that poem is really kind of showing people my perspective. Like if you're just a non-black person, it's like, and something like this has never happened to you. You've never had any of these things said to you, or you've said some of these things and thought nothing of it. Um, I I like that it was able to, I don't want to say educate, but it was able to let people into my perspective and kind of get a view into my world. And not only this, how I see everything, this is how I feel about everything. Because for me, that was really important to have people feel the way that I felt. And I like, I know that sometimes when I perform that, I can see like the concentration in people's face, or like the empathy in people's face. Like they're really listening, getting a feel, and they're also reflecting. So that to me is wonderful. Um, and with breaking news, which is the much more angry of the two. And like I wrote that years ago, and every time there's an instance of an unarmed black person being killed by police or by something else, it feels relevant. My friend Nydia, shout out to Nydia. She's teaching an online English class, and she told me today actually that she put breaking news on her English exam because of how relevant it is. And she actually called me and she told me, like, she read out some of people's responses to it. And what I liked about that is I could tell from people's responses that they were getting it. And not that you get everything completely, and you won't get everything completely, especially when it comes to such personal poems. And sometimes I don't want you to. Like there are things in there that are supposed to be misleading and clever and poetry devices, blah blah blah. But what I really liked about hearing people's responses is like, you're understanding this. Like people, I heard people be like, this is, I'm frustrated that, or people were saying was like, his frustration is that attention is being put on these other things and people are asking the wrong kinds of questions. Um, like I think one of my favorite lines from that poem is, "Don't you dare tell me that I'm overreacting. If it's not something you have to worry could happen." And in some people's responses, and when I perform that poem, like I've seen that line resonate with people, and that that for me is like, that is the crux of that poem for me. It's like, this is this is my lived experience, so I don't need to have conversations about why what this person did was wrong, or how these cops are just trying to do their job, or things like that. It's like, you're really not see, it's like, I think with Black Reflection, it's like maybe turning your head to the issue. But with breaking news is like grabbing you. It's like, look and listen to this. I'm mad. I'm like, Black Reflection is more frustration, and breaking news is definitely anger. And I think, like it upsets me. It upsets me how relevant it is. Like when George Floyd was killed, some people shared the poem. I thought about posting it, and it's like, I'm upset that so much of this poem is relevant. Um, yeah, but again, having having people be able to see that perspective, and for maybe people who have that perspective of like, oh, you shouldn't be rioting, or you shouldn't be this angry, showing them why I'm angry, and having and kind of like the oh, like maybe like satirizing their opinion. It's like writing it the way that I did. It's like, oh, that's how I sound. Like, that's what I think. That's ridiculous. I'm like, yes, that's exactly the point. It's ridiculous, and you need to see that it's ridiculous, and you need to stop. That's essentially the message of breaking news.
No, and I felt that every time I've heard breaking news as well. I definitely see it in the room. I feel it in my own core. So I can definitely respect everything you're saying.
It was really helpful. I think that that conversation was because I think, like, again, like it validates the feelings that you have, the feelings of anger, sadness, hopelessness, frustration, like a sense of injustice. Um, but I think the hopeful part of it at the end was really great, and I was not expecting that conversation to be as positive as it was. I was expecting people to be more angry. I was expecting to be more angry. When I spoke to Karen, because we did kind of like a pre-interview to see if I would be a good fit for the panel, and I was angry in that conversation. When we did our like a pre-recording of the show to make sure that everyone's sound and light was good, I was angry in that conversation too. So to be able to have that conversation and to have it be so constructive, there was not a lot of arguing with each other. Like, I know that not everyone agreed with each other's point, but it felt like everyone was respectful of each other's opinion. Of when people were talking, there was not a lot of people talking over each other. I think that there was definitely some solid goals. Maybe not goals, but it's like it was making the point to be like, we need to start having these conversations outside of the Black community. We need to be having these conversations on a regular basis and not just when there's tragedy. Um, and I think everyone, because I really think that when there are incidences like this, that it can be easy to slip into hopelessness and to slip into despair, and to get really pessimistic, because it would be easy to do so. Like, we're seeing all the protests and the riots that are happening around the world, and like it takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of work, and it will not be easy. And like, I know the Minneapolis police has decided to like their police department is being broken apart and will no longer be a thing. And there's pushes towards that in other places. Like, I signed petitions today like asking counselors to be like, you need to review the police budget and what they're doing and defund them. Um, but I'm surprised at just the positivity that came from it. Like, the overwhelming feeling that we need to come together as a group to support each other, to check in on each other, like outside of the Black community, like connecting with those people, finding allies, like giving people information if they need to get information. Um, so I was very glad that the conversation was so positive, and that I felt really good afterwards. Like, I was hot. I was very hot
Mhm.
after doing it, but I felt like a weight had been kind of lifted off my shoulders. And I think that it helped me be less angry, because I was like, when I saw the George Floyd video, I was really, really upset. And I think because that I found out about the Amy Cooper, George Floyd, and Regis Paquette like literally within the
Yep.
same day.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
it was just, I was so angry, and to be able to have a conversation, and again, it was kind of like a poem, because it was like, this is what I'm angry about. I'm angry about this thing. Let's look at it at that way. I'm angry about this thing. Let's look at it that way, and be able to work through it to a conclusion. Like, there wasn't a resolution, because, like, as I said, like the work doesn't stop. Like, Blackout Tuesday was last week and it was great, but like the for us to reach the goal as a society, I don't mean us as in Black people, I mean us as a society, as everyone, for us to reach that goal, we're going to have to continue to work, and we're going to have to continue to do these things. And I got the sense from that conversation that it is possible. Definitely being in a pandemic helps because everyone's already paying attention to the news. People are not going anywhere. But I didn't feel as crushed as I could. Yeah. And I think to have, and to the dad aspect of it, what I liked about that was that we both, I think, were able to discuss things that we hadn't explicitly discussed with each other, and there was no hesitation with that. Like, I know that as I was talking about how I felt about certain things and how I was reacting to everything that was going on, that these are not conversations that I've had with my dad. And because he is my dad, he's obviously, hopefully, he's gonna care and be concerned and not want to hear that things are not going well. But I had no reservation in talking about the things that weren't going well, and like being honest with how I was feeling, even though he was there. And the same thing for him, to be able to see him talk about the things that he's going through and feeling, and that he's dealt with in the past. Like, he told me about a police encounter that I remember, but I saw it completely differently. So to kind of be able to understand and relate to my dad on a different level was something that was great. And my dad and I are close. We have conversations all the time, but I think to really hear how he was feeling and how he was dealing with everything was great. I think it will make it easier for us to have more personal conversations in the future, because we have a better idea of what each other is going through or has gone through.
No, and I'd say I agree with everything you said. I think it was really important that you were there in that conversation, because there's almost this, like, there's an intergenerational aspect of everything that's going on, and I think people don't always want to speak about that. And I think it was important to have his perspective, to have your perspective. And I feel like she hosted very well, and I feel like overall the conversation, like you said, everyone had a chance to say their piece. And again, it wasn't, even if people had different perspectives and didn't necessarily agree with their points, everyone kind of understood where everyone was coming from and just kind of left it at that. It wasn't it wasn't meant to be argumentative. It wasn't meant to be a back and forth. It was more like, here are all of our perspectives, our different experiences.
Yeah, exactly.
And I thought it was very important that you were there as a part of all that, because again, like, you're going to have your own unique perspective, and then having your dad there and having his, and then having yours, and seeing the different lenses. But we're all still living in this time period where this is happening, unfortunately. You know what I mean? So it's like, how do we all, you know what I mean? Like, I've had conversations with my mother about things that have happened, that happened to family members that she knew, Black Canadian family members who were working on different projects, and things happened. And I look at my grandmother, who survived, was alive during the Great Depression, who experienced so much racism. And she's still alive to this day. It's her birthday today. She turned 90.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
How old is she turning?
90.
Okay, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Go. That's
right. But it's things like that people think, oh, well, how can this stuff still be happening? How can it be a reality? The people who experience this stuff are still here. So as long as that is still a reality, it's still very much important that we have these discussions and that we speak on these issues. And I liked seeing, what I really liked about the panel was I felt like every single person in that panel had a different experience, had a different story. They were all very unique into themselves. So it was very much like you're getting so much information, so much perspective from everyone. And everyone felt so open. Everyone was so open and so candid about how they felt. One thing, I implore all of you to go watch it 100%. But one question when she brought up, what have your experiences been dealing with the police? And what are your worries that come with that? I thought that was incredibly insightful. And it was sad hearing some of the responses and how people have had to kind of be like, how am I going to navigate this situation now, you know, once they get into it. So amazing conversation. I definitely 100% think people should go and watch that if they have not already.
Yeah, I really am very thankful for Karen for for having that platform to speak about that, because I've been posting things on Instagram, but that's more information, and this really was just about feeling. Um, that was really great. It was really really great to be able to have that. And I would encourage everyone who's watching, like whether you're black or not, to
Mm-hmm.
have these conversations with people. Like ask them about how they're feeling, how they're responding to things, like past experiences that they've gone through, because you'll learn from them. It's like maybe you would not have done the same thing that someone did in that situation, but if you have insight as to why some person acted the way they did, I think that can help you. And to the point that you were talking about the police, I something that I realized as I got older was I was given a talk about how to handle with police, like how to handle police, how to interact, about being polite, about knowing your rights, about having your ID and whatnot on you. Um, and I didn't, but what I didn't realize, what was missing from that conversation, was that this was a matter, it could be a matter of life and death. That the way that I was looking at it, it's like, you don't want to do this because you don't want to get in trouble with the police. You don't want the police to think that you are someone or something that you're not, like that you're not a dangerous person. And I know especially in high school, I would interact with police in almost a bold and brazen way. It's like, I know that I've done nothing wrong and that you have no business being here having a conversation with me. So I was kind of like, well, whatever. Like I don't have to be yes sir, because like I've done nothing wrong. And it wasn't until I got older and realized, it's like, oh, like I think the issue of respectability politics was something that it's like,
Mm-hmm.
if I'm a respectable person, then I will be treated respectfully, because that's what I do. If you're a respectable person, I treat you respectfully. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized, it's like, you being you being black, us being black in general, like people will see you as a threat. People will assume the worst of you, no matter what you do to to prove them wrong or to combat that. And I kind of had a shift in that way. It's like, oh, I have to I have to kind of take on this yes sir and be very polite and be worried, because before that I wasn't worried. I think before I heard about like the Trayvon Martins, the Eric Browns, or the Michael Brown, the Eric Garners, like I wasn't worried. I'm like, this is not something that would happen. And then kind of realize, no, that it could, because racism is pervasive and it's very real. Uh, so that was definitely a very interesting thing that came out of that conversation. Hmm.
No, I totally agree. And I want to bring it back to kind of an audience comment. My chat is so weird right now, but from Nydia Riza, there is a duality in thinking where one half thinks the civil rights movement is old, picks up MLK are shared in black and white to make people feel like it was so long ago, but it wasn't.
Mm.
On the other hand, some people think this is new, that George Floyd sparked a movement. He didn't, he's not the first and won't be the last. Both schools of thought contribute to the idea that we have been living in a post-racial society. I definitely agree. I don't want to compare, but one thing I do that I think some people don't think about is, for example, for Indigenous people with residential schools, what people don't know is the last residential school closed in 1996. That was the year my brother was born. That
Yeah.
is not a long time ago.
Hmm.
And for someone who was in a residential school in 1996 that is alive today, how can you expect them to just be living as if nothing's wrong, and if they weren't impacted by that in any way, when that was a big portion, when that was a part of their life? So I
Yeah.
feel like it's similar here, as people want to pretend like these things, oh, this doesn't happen, or this hasn't happened in so long. These things are not new occurrences.
Hmm.
Please do your research, look at history, and you will see that this is not something that was like aeons ago
Yeah.
that some people dealt with and then never happened again. And there's also systemic racism. There's the ways in which a lot of things you are not going to see on camera, but they are meant to sabotage and dismantle. And there's a whole conversation on that. But I 100% implore people to please do your research because there is so much more to these things and they are present day and they are still prevalent and taking place.
Yeah, and I think I don't want to say that I like that you brought up residential schools because for me I think learning about the residential school system, like even saying it now, like it hurts so much to because like it's so evil,
Mm-hmm.
it's such an evil tactic. And I think the thing that I hate the most about it is just how like strategic and thought out it was. Like it was very deliberate. Like the way that it was set up and like the effects of it, like intergenerational trauma is like you see it in indigenous communities here. And like I'm not a part of indigenous communities. I only get stuff from like news and reports, but it's like it's so disgusting. And I think and to the point that you were making about how it's like yes, people to the people are not being sent to residential schools anymore. And yes, like people are not like segregation is not a thing and people aren't being murdered in the ways that they were before. But just because those things are no longer happening doesn't mean that the racism that allowed them to happen, that allowed for people to think that this okay, is still around. Like for the indigenous issue, we just have to look like the law that Alberta passed last week about protests happening and about being arrested, the Wet'suwet'en protests that were happening with the
Mm-hmm.
railroad, like that was this month.
Mm-hmm.
Like I know that we've
Mm-hmm.
been in a pandemic for 3 months and it's kind of just warped everyone's idea of time, but it's like that's an issue that was happening a few months ago. And it's like, where did those issues stem from? They stem from years and years of racism. And so, and I think that that is, I think that that's something very important that we need to emphasize now in this moment of having this, the Black Lives Matter conversation, is that while yes, progress has, because progress absolutely has been made, it has definitely been made, but there's still work to be done. I think that with the issues that have happened in Canada recently, and I just wrote about this the other day, is that we we need to move away from comparing ourselves to the states, because when we do that, we it's like, oh, we're just going to look at what's going on here and we're not going to look at what's happening here. So yes,
Mm-hmm.
and I will say this, I know that not everyone agrees with it. I definitely think that racism is more pervasive and more like in your face in the States than it is here. But I know that racism exists here because I've experienced it. I've seen it. I've heard it from other people. Like if you and I were to have a conversation off air, I'm sure that you could tell me about horrible things that people have said to you. So I think that while we're having these conversations, we do have to admit the fact that change is happening and that progress is happening, that there are that racialized communities are getting more allies all the time, but that doesn't mean that these problems go away. Like
Yeah.
the point that was brought up, it's like I know for a fact that George Floyd will not be the last unarmed Black person who dies. He won't be the last unarmed Black person who dies this month. I know that. And even though we're having all these conversations now and people are learning and people are committing to doing things, racism is not just like racism will not go away in like a matter of days or months, because they've been going on for hundreds of years. Like I don't know when the
Exactly.
first slave trade happened, or like when European settlers arrived in North America and started just destroying destroying the land that was here. But it's like these are not things that can be fixed easily, and we have to have these kinds of conversations. Like we need to listen to things like the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, or
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I couldn't remember the word. And it's like we need to listen to um, Black writers and Black thinkers when they're talking about their experiences and when they're like breaking down the racial theory. It's a lot of work has to be done. A lot of difficult work will have to be done. But I've been saying this since the beginning of the pandemic, is that we cannot, like we absolutely cannot come out of this pandemic and go back to the same thing that we were doing.
Mhm.
Like I've had conversations with people who were staying in like homeless shelters about that, and we've seen how ravaged the homeless shelters and long-term care facilities have been. We've seen that people who are in precarious work and low-wage work have been really just screwed over by losing work. And even from like a climate perspective, we it's like now that we're away from causing all the damage, we're able to see it better, and it's like we need to do practical, actual things to make these things better, because it's not working, and it's really not okay. It's not okay.
Hmm. And I completely agree with that. There needs to be long-term, tangible change. And it's so much more than, and obviously people, can only do what they can, especially now given the circumstances and given what's going on. But I
Absolutely.
completely agree with you. When things clear up and people are able to do more, we need people to do more. That's
Hmm.
100%. And I do hope that, because the world is changing in really dramatic and drastic ways and dynamic ways right now. So I hope to see the same. And, you know, hopefully the next time we have a conversation like this, we can have seen it and can talk about what's next. You know what I mean? Because there's always going to
Yeah.
be more. I saw a tweet today, I think, where someone's like, oh, like 400 years of this is not going to be changed in a week. And it's like, yep, you're absolutely right.
Exactly. Like, because I mean, I consider myself a progressive person, but it's like I know I'm still unlearning stuff and dealing with stuff. Like,
Mm-hmm.
but just because you cannot be turned, like, and I'm clapping, like you cannot be turned off by the amount of work that you have to do, that we all have to do, and you can't avoid it. Yeah, I think everyone needs to take responsibility and just act better. Yeah. When it comes to all of the things, really, like really and true, like I in about a week, I should be going to, like, if the pandemic wasn't happening, I would be going to Italy for a not for a tournament, for to
Oh,
watch a tournament. And
can I
I
come in your suitcase?
my my the only reason I'm gonna say no is because I know that getting through, like, between me and my girlfriend, going through security would just be like a mess. So trying to smuggle a person, I'm like, oh my gosh, it'd be a mess. And with all of the things that I've said and thought about Donald Trump, like, they would definitely take me into holding.
Dang.
But otherwise, I would absolutely do it. But the thing that I was gonna say was, and I've seen it talked about in the last couple of weeks, is that everyone needs to be angry about what's going on, because I was thinking about going to Italy and Spain, because I have tickets to games in both those countries. And for me, what I thought was, I do not want to go to both, because that's extra air travel. Like, just making my carbon footprint unnecessarily big by doing that. And I was frustrated. I was frustrated one because like I had that thought, and it's like I know that there are people who would not give that a second thought, who would not care. It's like I'm just who either they don't know about climate change and global warming and carbon footprints and how bad air travel is, and cruises are awful. Um, and there's people who know but don't care. And I was
Mhm.
frustrated that I'm like, why am I? Why? am I suffering? Like, why am I not going to get to go to these two places because I have this knowledge, because I know that I'm doing something irresponsible and I don't want to do it? Until everyone kind of has that twinge of, this is the wrong thing, I shouldn't be doing it, we're not going to get to where we need to be. And that comes to all of the isms, like all of the isms.
Sorry, you're frozen on my end, Mars. Okay, I can see you now.
Oh, sorry, my phone is telling me that my battery is getting low.
Okay. Do you want to just, I missed the end part of that sentence. Do you just want to finish what you were saying there?
I was just saying that, and like, until everyone is bothered by it when it comes to all of the isms, then we're
Hmm.
not going to get to where we need to be, because everyone needs to be upset about these things as the people who are passionate about them, to have any
Agreed.
chance of having any action go forward.
100% agree. And thank you for sharing all your thoughts on that. I think that was really insightful. I think I agreed with pretty much everything you said because it's true. There's just so much work to do, and you're right. People need to be as upset if they're not impacted by this as we are when we are upset and we're angry about this.
Yeah.
So I completely agree. And I hope that, I really do hope that the next time we're able to connect in a certain way that we can say, okay, we can see things moving in the right direction. I'm hopeful. Not saying that's what it's going to be.
Mhm.
Um, but we still got lots of years to live, Mars. So
We do.
hopefully.
We do. And I think one thing that I got from the conversation on the Karen Carrington show was, my dad said, it's like, I don't see these changes happening in my lifetime. Like, sorry, his lifetime. He's like, I don't think that they will be changed by the end of your lifetime, when he was talking to me. But he's like, I am hopeful, or like, from this conversation, I'm hopeful that your children will not have to live through this. And I that seems realistic. I think that
Mhm.
I hope, I really, really hope that by the time that we're having kids and they're growing up and they're becoming of age, that the conversations that we have will be easier to have, because we will have done some of the work. Like, we will not be in a tenuous, like, almost almost untenable situation. That's my hope.
No, and I completely agree, and that's mine as well. But speaking of the future, then what can we expect next from Mars the Poet, especially post quarantine, post COVID, when we're all able to do everything again, and I'll hopefully be seeing you on a stage again soon, where we can take a
Yes.
picture.
Yes,
What can we
we
expect
will
from
we will
you?
definitely. I'm gonna put like a notification in my phone for when I go to UTSC. Picture with Zachariah. But what's next for me? I did take I did take advantage of the fact that we are in this quarantine period, and the fact that April was Poetry Month to write, which was really good. So I definitely have some pieces that I need to finish. I applied to an artist grant back in March, and I didn't get it. But the proposal that I had to do, it gave me a clear idea of what it is that I want to do. So I have my goals. I know that I want to have a certain number of publishable poems finished. I want to start using my Instagram more to have video recordings, to have like the collage that you had for this. Like, I want to have things like that, so that my poems don't just look like standard Instagram poems with the black font and the white and the MR at the bottom. So incorporating visual aspects, incorporating sound. Before everything happened, I was supposed to be meeting with a producer and audio engineer to see about doing a mixtape type thing.
Okay,
So
Mars,
yeah,
yes.
I'm oh man, I have to keep up the momentum for when we get out of this, because we had a great conversation. But I think I want to explore the music side of it more. Definitely finishing some of the poems that I've started. Um, yeah, but that's what's next for me. Also, I want to be doing what you're doing, and have more conversations like this. Like, I miss being on the Borough Sound because I miss being surrounded by artists and having conversations with people. And just like this, like you and I are just hanging out. We've been hanging out for like the last hour or something. And it's like, I want to be able to do that more. And I think being separated from everyone and having like Zoom conference calls has kind of reignited that spark to have these kinds of conversations. So that's what's next for me.
Very, very exciting. I want to hear that mixtape. What?
What?
You got me hyped now.
Oh man. Oh man. I don't know how it's gonna turn. I don't know how it's gonna turn out, but I like the idea of poetry and music. I think it'll be fun. I think it'll be
Me
fun.
too. Me too. Oh my gosh. Well, where can the people find your ads? Where can they follow you so they can see what you're doing? And where can they get the book? Now, if I could be like Oprah and just send y'all copies and be like, everyone who tuned in today gets a book, I would do it. But for the people who want to support a Black business, where did they get the book to?
Okay, I'm going to put the link to the book back into my profile. If you search Lulu and Mars the Poet, or Book of Mars, which is the title of the book, you'll find a link to it. If you want to connect with me personally on my Instagram, which is Mars the Poet, I printed out a bunch of books and I still have, I think, maybe 14 or 15 of them. So I am able to meet people and sign them, because if you order them online, you'll get it. It's not signed. And I like signing all of my books
You signed
personally.
mine. You did sign mine. I'm not gonna say what it says, but you did sign mine.
I love that. One of my favorite poetry experiences is actually a poet that I studied. She came to my table during an intermission and she read my favorite poem to me and then signed the book there. So me signing books is something that
Wow.
I love doing. Um, Mars the Poet on Instagram is where you'll see most of the stuff. If you go on Twitter, my handle is Marcus_ROI, which is Roi in French. That's where some of my more journalistic and ranty stuff is. But those are the two main places to connect with me.
Okay, sounds good. And could you send me that link to the book because I'll
Yeah.
put it on when I post it on YouTube. I'll make sure it's in the description box so
Oh,
people can get it there too.
you're a gem. Gem and I. You see that?
Yes, June 7th, baby. Well, thank you so much, Mars. It has been such a pleasure. It always is connecting with you. But I was really looking forward to this conversation, and
Me
I'm
too.
so glad that we got to really have kind of a full discussion
Mm-hmm.
over a bunch of things.
Absolutely.
Mars and I have also spoken, and this is something to anyone who's seen some of the past lives, that I do want to be able to have more detailed conversations on different topics in a longer span. So again, something I still have in the works. Mars is definitely open to it. So stay
Absolutely.
tuned for that. Once I have more an idea of how I want to present that and how I want to facilitate that. But otherwise, thank you so much, Mars. I really do appreciate it. And I can't wait till we can connect in person again.
And I want to thank you, one for just inviting me onto your platform to talk, which is something I appreciate. But I I really appreciate the conversation and the bond that we have. Like as we've said, you and I, our friendship is almost strictly based on events, so we don't see each other often. But you are truly someone that I consider very close, and you're a great person. I don't know if you can swear on your show, but you're great, man. You're so great. So I'm glad to be a part of this project and to be able to connect with you in this way. And what I like about this conversation is I think this opens the door for more conversations like this in the future, which is something I absolutely am looking forward to.
And I agree. And I feel the same way about you. I think you are so talented. I think you are just an amazing person. And I think there's such a great respect between the two of us and the arts that we do.
Yeah,
And I think that's why
absolutely.
when we connect, it's so deep and I can be so candid with you and honest with you. And I feel likewise. And
Hmm.
I don't have that with everyone. So that's why I really do appreciate it.
This is great. Like I'm tired, I'm hungry. Like I definitely got to eat, but I'm so energized by this conversation. I feel great. I feel
Like,
great.
Well, thank you so much. I see some comments from Nitty saying, love you guys. I still remember APX Talent Night with both of you. That was
Right.
an interesting night, Henny. That was, girl, we ain't gonna get into all of that, but that, thank you.
Oh my gosh. Oh my goodness. Yeah, honestly,
That
this
was an
conversation could
interesting
go on
one.
forever. It could go on
Yes.
forever.
But all right, you have a great night. Thank you everyone for tuning in. And expect more coming soon from the both of us. Thank you again, Mars. You have a great night.
You as well. Bye, friend.
See you guys.